thank you all for coming. This actually is the last time I get to chair this particular meeting, and so I've got a short speech, no more than 3 pages, so I would like to thank all of you serving on committees, serving as chairs of committees. One of the things that makes this community operate so effectively is that it is from the membership up, and the way that works is through our committee participation. I know from my experience serving on committees before I ran for the board that we welcome members to attend our meetings. I know some of our committees meet in the conference room, but I wonder if you would raise your hand when you've ever had a committee meeting where you didn't have enough room for visitors. Anybody ever? You did? When did that happen? Wildlife, huh?
Several months.
Really?
We had so many it chased Michael out of our meetings.
Well, if that's the way to do it, we'd like to talk to you about that.
They meet in the
So that's the exception that proves the rule. That while we meet in the conference room, generally we don't get very many of our members to attend those meetings. And if there's a way we can increase that, I promise you we would find a larger room. But we work effectively because of your service on the committee, and for each one of you that takes the time to do that, I for one appreciate it. I know the board, as we operate, we refer to the committee process for us to move these ideas forward. So on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank each and every one of you, and I'd like you to convey that to your committee members, that we do appreciate what you do. So with that, I see that Bob is not here, so is there anyone from Bylaws Committee that could make a report? If not, then we'll move to ACC. Mr. Miller.
The ACC had our regular twice-a-month meeting scheduled the 1st and the 15th. We only had one house in the month, and we had 9 miscellaneous permits, and this is kind of following what has appeared to be a slowdown a little bit. Brent tracks the number of homes, and there's about 40, I think, under construction here now as we talk about this. There was a period of time a couple of weeks ago, well, a little longer than that, when one of the premier builders out here had made the decision to move out. They have since worked out some things that are acceptable working with the developer, and they have chosen not to do that. However, there's 2 things we need to keep in mind. One is, if and everybody goes through Acton and down to the west of the post office in Acton, all of those new homes that are being built in there, bunches and bunches of smaller, less expensive homes that will be attractive to some of the people that we've tried to attract. And the other one that's probably more of a challenge to us, across the road south of the Acton AMUD office, east of De Cordova, there's an area in there that is being developed, and you don't see much when you drive. You only see 2 or 3 houses. But one of the ACC members went in there the other day, sort of accidentally. I mean, he was following a dump truck and nobody caught him. Those houses in there are significant. they will attract a lot of the people that we would like to have in here. We need to be mindful of that as we go forward and do what we can to keep ourselves in a competitive situation. That may be more than you wanted to know. Thank you.
Well, I would comment on that we go back to who we are, and we have, I know that development, the houses are looking like they're pretty substantial houses, and $500,000 and up, but they don't have a golf course, and they don't have a clubhouse, and they don't have a park, and they don't have the kind of amenities that we offer. So we need to market this place when we see that kind of competition.
That's true, but they don't also have a monthly assessment, I don't know.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out, because it is a gated community. Yeah. Okay, fine. And Bob, before you start, on the ballot initiatives, we seem to be having trouble communicating to our membership the strategy behind our proposals for generating the revenue we need to do those projects. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Well, yeah, I heard a few things at this morning's Breakfast Club meeting that sort of surprised me, that people are just not aware, basically, of what this assessment is for, basically. The $9 is not for M&O, maintenance and operation. It's specifically for one process, and that's for your capital assets, to keep them in an improved status. And, you know, if I throw numbers at them, their eyes roll. So I appreciate Ross's communication that he did at the last town hall meeting, and it's a shame that we couldn't have had that presented prior to now. I think that was more effective than us throwing numbers at them, but I could be wrong. I don't know how else to communicate specifically.
And Ross, I don't know if is Neil here? Neil, I just wonder if we could have Ross do that presentation at the Breakfast Club next week. It looked like we had 100 people in that room.
Well, actually, Joe and I have talked about it. I don't know that I would do the same presentation. I think if we show the same thing, that's a problem. I've got some thoughts. I'll send it to all the board members once I get 5 minutes to sit down and put those on paper, but I want to go after it, but I think maybe in a somewhat different format to address some of the questions and issues that were brought up today, and still the lack of understandings that so many members have for what we're trying to do and how we got there.
Yeah, very important, Bob.
Yeah, I think there was a complete lack of communication of how this rolled up. A lot of people don't realize what went into the efforts to get to where we are. And I think that's been lacking in our presentations.
I would like to make one statement too. You know, I've had this conversation on Next Door Pecan, and I always lose, but that's okay. But my comment is, you know, if we don't rebuild the 19th hole, then our O&M cost is going to go up. It's not going to go up, but we have a significant O&M cost to maintain the 19th hole. There's a lot of repairs and maintenance that's going to need to be done there over the next couple of years. If we do refurbish the 19th hole, our O&M will actually go down a little bit, because we'll have a nice, clean, new facility that just doesn't require much preventative maintenance, at least for several years afterwards. So there is a little bit of cost trade-off in building the new amenities, as opposed to trying to recreate and restore the amenities we have back to their glory days of 1970s.
Yeah, I think the point needs to be made. There's no return on investment of what you're doing to your own property. And that's where your accounting people out there are looking for. But I do feel when we start a major project like that, we should have a better business plan put together that would justify it going in.
Yeah.
I'll request a conference for next week. With you guys.
Well, I know you said Joe and Joe Hartman and somebody else were going to chair that, so whoever that is, just get with them, and if we can get Ross to do one of those short presentations.
It was contemplated that I and Lee would.
Oh, that's right, it was you.
Do a presentation.
So, yeah, go ahead, Joe. Oh, you need a mic?
This has been a revolving topic a little bit. The latest version that we had till this morning is that Bob Z and I and Bob Cote would be there to answer questions. Ross would kind of go through the presentation that we had at the town hall and go from there. Ross has come up with, after this meeting we had this morning, what we're thinking about doing is addressing some of the issues that were brought up then. So we're going to maybe reformat a little bit, but it'll be on a thumb drive and we can reload real quick. So I hope that answers your questions.
Stay tuned, it'll change.
Good. Go ahead, Z, you have anything else?
Okay, we, Finance Committee met yesterday morning. It's a rather short meeting, which was nice for a change. We only have one ACE, and that has to do with the irrigation design request in the amount of $23,900, plus a 10% contingency for additional site visits if required. And we have an expert here that can answer any questions you may have on irrigation on the golf course, if you have them.
Michael, you have anything you want to say? Okay.
He said it all yesterday, I think. Anyway, we're asking the board to consider this for approval. We found it very acceptable. Again, there was only one question raised from one of the members that I got from our posting on the web of the AFE, and they wanted to know why there was a unbudgeted item. And I think I resolved that problem in writing to the person and talked to them in person. Again, it is not a budgeted item, but again, it's coming from the new capital fund. The reason it wasn't budgeted, it was a complete oversight, because we need to have this bid ready to go during the winter time. And as you know, our fiscal year ends in October, so we'll probably be doing most of the work starting in November or soon after it's approved. That being said, I'll just communicate to you the financials, but I'm just going to give you the end of the third quarter. I give it to you monthly. It changes every month, but I like to look at it on a quarterly basis. For the first quarter of this fiscal year, our revenue was $1,699,000, or we were $38,000 ahead of the budget. And believe it or not, we were 6% ahead of the prior year. Our cost of goods sold was over the budget by $31,500, but that's due primarily to food and beverage. Our cost of labor for the quarter is below the budget by $36,000 due to the open positions that we still have available, and represents approximately 54% of our expenses. Other expenses is under budget for the quarter by $86,000. Our bottom line, we're ahead of the budget by $130,000. That's basically what we look at the end of the quarter, which I hope is representative as we move forward. Our capital reserve funds, our revenue for the quarter was $278,000, but we spent $283,000. We have additional budget expenses for the year of $776,000. Our new capital fund is showing a balance of $92,000 with budget commitments of $17,500 so far. Doesn't include the irrigation design work. Road and Drainage Fund has a balance of $794,000, and we're looking for improvements for year-end of $1,111,000. The other business that we considered, we reviewed the current accounts receivable and payable as they relate to the balance sheet, and we will be discussing these more in the next year. I shouldn't say next year, the next meeting. We discussed changes to the columns financial reporting of the outstanding cash balance. We feel very strongly that the amount that's reflected in the columns for our cash for maintenance and operation does not reflect the true cash balance. It does not include or take out the commitments that we have for that money. A brief review of Part 1 camp for the marina. We had several questions that we're trying to get some answers on that project, and hopefully that'll be resolved before our next meeting. That's it for the Finance Committee, unless you have some questions.
I have one question, Bob. You said that we had a commitment of $17,000 for our irrigation design coming out of new capital asset. Why wouldn't that come out of our capital asset reserve fund?
If you'll recall, at the end of last year, we basically set a new policy in effect that dealt with the new capital fund. And basically, we would have any consulting work for a new project, the money would come out of the new capital fund, and if the project went through, it would then be, the new capital fund would be reimbursed from the capital reserve fund. But if it did not go, then that amount would be charged against operation. So the new capital fund acts as sort of a reserve.
Okay, all right. I honestly don't remember that. I take your word for it. Okay.
Yeah, going back to the golf course, I've got a couple of questions on the irrigation, and actually I was a little surprised to see that we did so much work on the course back in '96 and '99, and that a lot of the front 9 and the back 9 have been improved some, and so I wonder if during our work session we could get the golf superintendent to come in and give us a more detailed brief, maybe the golf committee chairman also.
Michael, that's next Monday at 2:30, and if we can get Mike Brown, is he here? Okay. 2:30, yeah. Thank you. Okay, anything else for Bob? I feel we're in good hands. Our finances are really, you guys have been good stewards of our finances. I hope you stick around, Robert. Okay, yeah. Next is long-range planning. Roger, do you have a quick report?
Yes, long-range planning, we did not meet last month. Bev and I discussed it, and as you're well aware, so much of long-range planning has to do with the ballot initiatives that we discussed, and so the decision was made, let's see where we end these ballot initiatives in March, and we'll have another meeting in March to kind of proceed from there.
I want to mention to the board that I think our bylaws require that a board member chair long-range planning, and so we're going to have to figure out how we want to manage that, either make an exception if everybody would want to stay on, or someone on the board would want to do it.
As Bob mentioned, in the committee's way it's set up, that's the only committee that's really headed up by someone that is an actual board member. I was the vice chairman of that committee since I've taken over, will be taking over presidency. We're going to need to change that. I've discussed it with Bev with the hope that she could possibly stay on. She is thinking about it. I can't give you an answer on that, so we are going to have to either have a board member or change how the more or less that policy regarding who can be the chairman of long-range planning.
Okay, yeah, that concludes my portion, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we'll start with Airport Committee today. Mr. Ray Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Bartholomew. I appreciate being able to go first here. I'm going to have to hit and run real quick. The Airport Committee did meet on February 14th at its normally scheduled second Wednesday. We had a quorum, and I'm pleased to report that we're making good progress on the GPS approach. It will be a 560-foot minimum with a 1-mile visibility. All the contracts have been executed, and the design is proceeding well. We're only waiting now for the FAA to come and do a flight survey of the approach, and we expect that to be maybe next month. I'll be able to report completion of a very, very long project. The Plainview Park renovation has proceeded. We held up for a couple of months to see some negotiations between EAA and the private residence that has the hangar. Those are ongoing, so we went ahead and released the bid specification to the contractors. Daniel sent those out, and our next month we will should have those back, and this will be back on schedule and proceed normally, I believe, at that time. We discussed the deer trapping at the end of the runway. We had a slow start on success at that location, but the films continue to show that deer are coming in there. It just happened to be weather and timing and other things that prevented the being successful. But we have done some good in reducing the deer traffic on the runway, and hopefully that will be completed at the next trapping. We discussed the west side ditch, which plays over into the whole road area along there. It's a major drainage basin, and I understand that LIDAR study has been utilized to do some modeling and shows that maybe a 5 by 5 foot culvert, square culvert, would be required underneath that road, which would just be an enormous expense. So the feedback to the committee was that that expense is probably beyond the current budget, and they're going to have to go back and relook at that. We did an experiment with runway lights being on at night. Some of the neighbors gave us some feedback that the lights were an incursion on some of their enjoyment of the dark night, primarily or to a large extent because of the windsock lights, which are right in people's backyards and other things. So we have reverted back to the normal pilot control lighting, and that, I believe, will continue. That completes my report.
Questions, comments?
Ray, you went back to get bids for the Plainview Park renovation, but I didn't. It's not clear. Are you going to get bids for both locations, or have you decided on a location?
We designed a project, and the first time we went out, we had multiple options. We simplified the options down to one design, but with two locations. The current location and a location that will be responsive to some of the requests and good judgment, I think. It will be outside the 200-foot from the center line of the runway, and it will be beyond the threshold of the runway, which is not binding and required for a private airport, but would be recommended for a public airport. And so what we're doing is to get bids for both locations. At the very next meeting, the committee will be able to make an informed judgment saying what the difference in cost will be to use the current location versus the new one, and make a recommendation to the board which way to go. I personally hope that we select the new location, but that's why it's a committee of several members, and so I can't tell you how that'll come out until we vote.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Oh, go ahead, Vance.
The other things about the interference with,
The other issue with the interference of the trapping at the end of the runway was a very notable detailed description of one resident's confessed interference with parking, yelling, walking towards, and chasing away the deer. Unfortunately for them, or should say fortunately for them, we're not going to pursue any legal actions at this time, but the next door pecan confession is going to be archived, and if that member is caught in the future, we will use that as an example of repetitive action of interfering with a state licensed trapper.
Thank you, Vance. Let's move on to anything else at the airport. If not, Gordon Johnson, Safety and Security.
Oh, thank you. Well, we had a full committee. Probably shouldn't put it that way. All members of our committee were in attendance on the 14th. We had a very long discussion about several different issues, one of them being the debate about speed limits. That will still be discussed before we come to the board with a recommendation. What we have done, and thanks to Mary helping me with preparing a DCR, you will see our recommendation for increasing the fines for speeding, all the way from doubling to, in some cases, indicating that there would be a flagrant violation. We did have a report from our former security supervisor who indicated that we had over 93 citations issued the previous month, which is what we have been asking for quite some time as a committee. Speed limits are going to be debated upside down and sideways, no matter what we do with them. My contention all along has been what we need to do is enforce the speed limits that we currently have. And I think that that's probably where we're going to end up. Fortunately, like I said, there was a great increase. We have more people now on the roads, at least two during the daylight hours, and sometimes two in the evening hours. Looking at when is it that people are tending to speed. Sometimes it's on the way out to work. Sometimes it's on the way home from work. Other times it's just people kind of lollygagging along and not paying much attention to what their speed is, and then all of a sudden they get caught. So what we recommended to you is just doubling those fines. We said farewell to Ty Harper as our staff member who was working with us most of the time on that committee, and we look forward to working with the next person who will be coming to us in the future. That substantively is what we've done, and we are, like I say, continuing to negotiate and work with one another in trying to come back to you with a statement about what the speed limits recommendation would be.
I guess I have a request more than a question. Could we look at having a radar set up on Ravenswood between about 5:15 in the morning to about 7 in the morning? That racetrack is getting up to 50 plus miles an hour running toward the gate, so people heading toward work. I don't know who you would now contact because Ty's no longer with us.
Well, I think Michael and I have discussed that. Michael?
Yes, we have. Yes. What block of Ravenswood do you know? 8700. Okay.
97 is a good straight shot.
Okay. We will concentrate on that. Thank you.
Again, we have talked about knowing that some of our residents
on next door pecan come up with some good suggestions. Some of them may not, but if they've indicated that they've noticed someone speeding in their area, and there's numerous reports of that, then we've always talked with security about making sure that they looked at those areas and had someone sitting there. In the past 5 weeks or so, there have been sometimes vehicles sitting by the side of the road, unoccupied, or security vehicles unoccupied, and that has made a noticeable decrease in some speeds. And then a little further on down the road, there may be someone sitting in the vehicle with a radar, and then the person who thought, well, I got by with that, there wasn't anybody in that vehicle, and they come up on another one, and bingo, they got caught. So, it's kind of a cat and mouse game sometimes for some folks. And mind you, there are some folks that will never pay attention. So we're just trying to deal with that by looking at the fines. There's someone in here, you will see it in the next columns, someone who was caught speeding for the third time. So in the future, that's going to be a very expensive proposition for that person continuing to do that. So we try to get people to get in the habit of watching your speed limit. I don't drive any place on the plantation without engaging my control speed, my speed control. So here we go. Thank you.
I've got a question. Are our speed limits in our policy manual?
Yes.
Okay, so in order to change them, we'd have to do and it's just policy, it's not bylaws.
That's correct. I would have to submit a DCR to you.
Rule and reg.
Okay.
It's in the rules.
Michael, just general update on your search for a security manager?
We're nearing the end of the application period, and I'll be making an announcement within the next couple days. Any other questions for safety and security? If not, Vance Blaylock, Wildlife.
Good morning. February 9th, we met, had a quorum, and 5 visitors. And the reason for our increased attendance is appealing to our most severe critics on the next door pecan. And unfortunately, the most severe critics failed to show up and express their views, but we do have quite a few critics that do show up. And surprisingly, we had a lot of people come around to understanding that we do not handle our deer population the way we want to, but how the state of Texas requires us to. So there is a slow increase in understanding of how the Wildlife Committee and this board operates to manage our deer population. And our larger room, I never know when that is needed until that morning. So I was absent at that meeting. Our Vice Chair, Jim Thompson, called it to order at 8:30. Discussion of the deer trapping led off the meeting with a report of 172 traps so far out of our 250 target. The last trapping will be this coming Friday, February 23rd, due to the trapper having previous commitments. So it's doubtful that we will get within 50 deer of our yearly target. The members who have visited, attended the meeting, expressed concern about the communication of our present population, which was derived from member counts, and also questioned about the state desired population. Also, the upcoming fawn crop was discussed, because of the artificial habitat and environment of pecan, we see twins very often and triplets quite often. So we have a higher than normal birth rate in pecan. It was projected that we will get 200 plus fawn drop this coming year, which will probably be real close to the amount we removed this season. We also discussed using, in conjunction with our committee, wildlife committee member count, which is turned over to the state, also utilizing an infrared drone count of the pecan area, which will include the orchard. So it'll give us a total area count. We'll turn that information into the state as well as our count of our average of 3 counts by our membership. The drone count will cost about 35 cents an acre, approximately $1,500. We have plenty of money in our budget of $75,000 to cover this expense. We've decided that this fall, after the counts are done, that one of our members will write an article for the columns detailing our deer count and the numbers turned over to the state and our desired population and trapping goals. So it's another step in giving our membership more information. We're still exploring the possibility of working with Fossil Rim. It was discussed that our in-house people will explore the possibility of taking over trapping duties, and with that we may have to approach the board to alter our live deer removal. The Fossil Rim will take deer, but they have to be dispatched. And if our people dispatch deer and take them to Fossil Rim, that will reduce our costs somewhat. But Fossil Rim so far has not said they would take our total trapping goal. And that pretty much concludes my report.
We also discussed hog trapping, and we're going to experiment with a new style of trap. So Daniel's working with the individual that actually invented it and is getting a patent for it. The traps that we've tried, the hogs are very trap wary, and we haven't had a whole lot of success, but they're still tearing up some people's yards, so we'll continue to try and address the feral hog issue in future months.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that.
I'm sorry, let me go back to the Fossil Rim project. You said they would take the deer after they were dispatched. Does that mean we kill them and send them over, or we catch them and send them over?
Dispatching, as far as I know, has no other connotation than sending dead deer to Fossil Rim.
So what are they going to do with them over there?
They feed them to their predators.
Okay, all right.
They have a large predator population exhibit. Cheetahs, I think, are a big part of it. But in my experience, I worked with the Missouri Wildlife Commission, and we processed our own dead deer that were dispatched mainly by roadkill and fed them to our predators, everything from eagles, wolves, bobcats, that type. But Fossil Rim has also expressed, stated that they do not have adequate cold storage for a large number that we are removing from pecan plantation. So if we ever need to make a donation for tax purposes, I would say we donate some cold storage units to Fossil Rim.
Another issue we have is 1 out of 10 deer have to be tested for chronic wasting disease, so that's another hurdle that we'll have to explore as we look at this situation. Anything else for Wildlife Committee? Ross?
Will the Fort Worth Zoo take them?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Will the Fort Worth Zoo take the dispatched deer? Or can we dispatch them and have them walk to the zoo? No, seriously, have we talked to them?
I have not heard about the Fort Worth Zoo except from you at this point in time. And we really encourage any member or board member who would like to pursue any efforts, any avenue to help us reduce our costs on deer to please do so.
Anything else? Thank you. Vance, Eric, and Infrastructure Committee.
Okay, we had our infrastructure meeting on February 6th. We had a quorum. Minutes from January were approved. The first thing we talked about was the guardrail damage, and it didn't take very long for that to happen, but fortunately it happened before we were planning to extend that guardrail up to the end of the new member lane extension that we had done earlier. So I know the damage was done by, we know who did it, and so there's nothing, I can't think of the word, but there was no bad intentions, I guess, on the damage to the guardrail. It was just an accident. So the extension is going to be done. It's supposed to be done actually very soon, here in the next week or so. Should see that damage repaired and extended. The next thing we talked about was we received the final report for the studies from HALF on the 4 drainage areas. We had talked about this last month. We had received the presentation from them, and so this was just a receipt of the final report and the final animations that came along with that. So the committee is reviewing those and working out a plan to implement. The next thing we talked about was the grounds committee had asked us to look at doing a survey for Plantation Drive. We had talked about this last month, where the positioning of that road is really unknown as far as where in the the property that it sits, as far as with the plans to add the pathway along the side of that. So we need to get a survey done. Daniel was pretty sure that the Anthonys have a survey, and so he's going to try to see if they can provide that. But then we'll continue to follow up on that and get that done. The next thing we talked about, the next projects, trying to get there's 2 roads that need work, Wedgefield and Ravenswood and Monticello. Belchase, sorry. Yeah, that section, there's a mile-long stretch there that both of those need work. It turns out, too, that there's a section of Ravenswood where the 10,500 block, where those 3 houses were put up between Ravenswood and the Orchard, have caused some drainage issues there. So we're having the engineering company look at that, the drainage underneath Ravenswood there, to make sure that it is sufficient, and before we go and repave or rebuild Ravenswood over that section. The remaining, there are no more engineering. Well, just for the roads, there's no more places that require engineering. However, on Wedgefield, there are 2 projects in the drainage study that we might like to incorporate if we're going to be repaving Wedgefield, that we might try to include, and so we're thinking about that. Part of it is on the Woodlawn section, or the Woodlawn project, there's part of that is to repair the drainage along the northern part of the airport along Wedgefield, and we might be able, and we would like to do that part of that project as part of redoing when we rebuild Wedgefield. The other part is the eastern Wedgefield project, and so we're going to be looking at that. And maybe those will be the projects that the roads are definitely the next projects in line to get done, and then we'll incorporate what we can from the Wedgefield project and the Woodlawn project.
Comments, questions? Go ahead, Mr.
Our RV club and the members here that use the campground for our mini rallies continues to grow. We have installed tables and grills at each of our sites, but the roads continue to deteriorate. I wonder if infrastructure has got that on your calendar of looking at a possibility of repaving at least the roads. The
Original plan was, I mean, the problem with repaving those roads is they're in the floodplain. Putting any kind of money into them would be, questionable. The idea was that the material that was dug up from the front entrance project was supposed to be the perfect, material to just lay down over the existing road. But I found out actually last night that that material isn't quite appropriate. It didn't turn out to be what we thought it was, or what Daniel thought it was.
I see that they're putting gravel in the parking lot behind the pack pool. Have we looked at maybe using that kind of a surface to pave those, at least to cover those? I think we're talking about the roads into and around the archery center and the campgrounds. Have we looked at doing something like that?
Well, I mean, that was the idea with the material from the front end, that was supposed to essentially do that. But now I think Daniel's got another idea that he's trying to get some material to do that. Other than that, then we would need to look at some sort of new material purchasing or something to do that.
So, but still, you mentioned it's in the floodplain. We have a LiDAR study that tells us where that water's going to go. I mean, we could strategically place culverts there, and I really wish that we could start that process of investigating how we can improve those roads. I mean, we're putting pretty large vehicles on those surfaces, and
I think the problem is when the river flows up like it did, it's the river that's just rushing by, and I've been told that, if you put a road that's perpendicular to the flow of the water's just going to pick up the road and move it. And so, unless we want to really spend a lot of money putting in a river-proof road, that's the issue. Right?
Well, we have, we have Ravenswood going through there, so yeah, that road would be parallel to Ravenswood, but I would like to know what it would cost to put in a flood-proof surface down there.
Okay, we can look at that.
Any other questions for infrastructure, grounds, and Roger Mayo? Sorry, you.
Good morning. We had a regular meeting on February the 6th. Just one project really to report on. We talked last month about installing, developing a boat ramp, or more likely a kayak ramp to the river. Originally looking at placing it underneath the bridge, the Brazos Bridge on the north side, using the concrete ramp down to the river. But turns out that would probably be an unsafe way of doing that, exposing people that may be walking down that ramp with a boat to falling. It's pretty steep. So working with Daniel, we're going to look at the other side of the river, which is much less steep, and actually maybe constructing a small parking lot that would be on the dam side of the bridge to allow easier access of kayaks. Although the river's more shallow over there than it is on the other side, which would require some portage, but you're going to have to do some portage on the river most of the time anyway. But anyway, we felt like that would be a better location to develop a little boat ramp. The committee voted for a couple of changes for next year. One of them, we submitted a DCR to increase the membership to 11, Doug, which he wanted us to do last year. But anyway, we did feel like maybe we needed a little bit more participation from the community, and that we would have maybe we had some folks who had to resign from the committee this year for various reasons. So we ended up with sometimes only 7 members. So anyway, we just decided that we would try to go for 11 members next year. Also, we voted to change our meeting time from 11 o'clock on the first Tuesday of the month to 8 o'clock in the morning. And we have some members that are still working and had to come back into Pecan for the meeting at 11 o'clock. So 8 o'clock was a good time for all of us that we felt like to meet, and more accommodating to the members. And I believe that's all we had to report.
Go ahead, Doug.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for increasing the membership. It's really it's hard getting people to volunteer for grounds committee to begin with. So it's always been a challenge to even fill up your committee. So if you had 11 people, you might not get 11 people. And while I'm on the subject, I'd also like to add, a lot of times the issue of quorum comes up. If you had a committee that you're authorized on your committee resolution 15 people, but you only had 9 people sign up for it, then really you only have 9 committee members, and a quorum would be 5, not half of what your authorized are. So having that higher authorization on your committee resolution, at least we can get more membership participation. And that was my whole point last year, was to try to encourage members to get involved and be part of the committees and work. So, and I'm speaking to all the committee chairmen here. I appreciate anything you can do to advance that cause, so thank you very much, Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any other comments?
I have one quick question, and it's my education in question right now. When the construction people, like developing the new subdivisions or sections within, who looks at the drainage, and where is the requirement to plan for that? Is that a part of the Anthony's when they do their subdevelopment of Park Place or any other area? Which committee group do I look at? What I'm trying to figure out, who here in Pecan is the one that kind of watches these subdivisions or new plans?
When the plan is submitted to the county looks at that. I don't know, they've had to redo some of the roads when the developer put them in because they did not meet the county specifications. As far as actual drainage, I have no idea.
I think they do have to have a plan with the county, but the county has nobody to come out and inspect it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
They had to have someone because it was through the county. We had the new airport area. They had to redo the drainage there.
Well, they had an inspector at that time. They don't. That's the problem. They don't anymore. And I just wonder if Lenmo might be. I know moving forward, it might be Lenmo that can play a role in serving as a watchdog for us to make sure that when those facilities get turned over to PPOA, that we've had a role in their design to protect us. And, I know that's a challenge, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It probably is the Lenmo committee, although it doesn't really have much to do with the limo agreement, but they're the only committee that is tasked with working with the developer. In the past, it's been very difficult to actually get the developer to meet in a meeting and discuss anything. I think our safety trail issue is a prime example of that, where the Anthonys they've talked out, they don't want to talk about it anymore. And so it's a challenge. But I think we're right on the landings. We accepted the roads after they built out the subdivision, or it exceeded the magic 25%. 25%. But Daniel refused to accept the ditches because they were not built adequate standards. So we do need to do more work, dialogue with the Anthonys.
Well, Orchard 12 is fast approaching, the turnover, I would suspect. And so there are issues there. And our committee talked about including that area in this last, as a fifth area. But, it's not our responsibility yet. Dick was a big advocate of trying to be on the forefront, and but then again, it's us telling the developer what to do with his land, and so.
Yeah. Well, I guess what brought up the question for me was when we had these three houses suddenly were built, and now all of a sudden there's a drainage issue. My problem with that is why weren't we looking at it prior to them being completed? Because
that was a little separate. That was the builder building on, if I remember right, the builder built those three houses against the advisement of the developer. The developer told him, those really aren't, you don't want to build there, but he...
Who's going to pay for the drainage issues that are developed?
Well,
I know the answer.
I mean, I happened to be driving on that road when it was 6 or 8 inches of topping over Ravenswood.
Yeah.
When that last house went in, and they actually had the forms planned for a fourth house on that empty lot.
Okay.
And the rain washed away all the form dirt, and so now it's just an empty lot.
Where exactly are they?
It's right around the turn off Monticello as you come around to head towards my house on Ravenswood, and it's those 3 new houses on the left.
Okay, and so and there was a fourth lot there that's not buildable.
Right. Yeah, they had forms. There were forms on that lot at one point.
How about the other houses that have been built recently on that side of Ravenswood toward your house? There are a lot of houses there, and in fact, one of them built a beautiful drainage system. I just wonder if those have been problematic.
No indications of problem yet. The one guy who built the big drainage thing, I drive by every day, and
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting what he's done.
We've actually gone down this road before, and when a property owner builds on their lot and submits their design, Brent, our code compliance, gives them, I believe he still does, basically a sheet of paper that says you're responsible for the proper drainage of your property, and if it causes other issues, that you will have to fix those issues. So in this case, this is an example of the lot owner and developer, not the developer, the lot owner and the builder not having done their proper due diligence on watershed. And so really it would go back to them, and so it would wind up in our court. We'd have to sue them to go and fix their lots, which is kind of a difficult position to be in because now we're suing our own members. So really the answer is to make sure that before they build, get their plot approval, but that they are fully informed and aware, and that's what ACC has been trying to do.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, let's move on. Brenda Palmer, Sports and Rec and Entertainment.
Thank you. I'll start off with entertainment. The 2018 Mardi Gras on the Brazos was a big success. Shad Ramsey of Shad Ramsey Photography took some great pictures, and our new Judith Bandy will be posting them in the columns for April. So if you participated, keep an eye out and see if you can't find yourself. Our numbers were down this year, but with our friend the flu running rampant here in Pecan, it was no big surprise. Our monthly karaoke nights continue to be very well-attended events, standing room only, so be sure and make your reservations for Lucky Clover Karaoke on Saturday, March the 17th, and join in on the fun. The next really big event will be Pecan's Got Talent, and it's ramping up for another talent-filled night on April 27th. Check the columns for information on how and when to sign up to share your talent with your Pecan neighbors. That's it for now. Be sure and check the columns for future events. Sports and Rec. We had two visitors at our last meeting, Bob Zimsky, who gave us a short presentation, and Brian Rogers, who spoke with the group to see if there was a desire for assistance in setting up social media sites. Thank you both for coming. We really appreciated it. Archery Airgun. The American Airgun Field Target Association, better known as AFTA, tournament will be held here in Pecan on March the 10th. The annual Easter egg shoot will be March 31st and is for ages 13 and over. Sign-ups at the PAC. Lights have been installed at the air gun shooting range, and we appreciate Daniel for doing that. Community gardens. Fencing is up and plans for the next phase are underway. Water is scheduled to be installed within the next 3 months. And check the Community Gardens website for more details, which is ppoagardens.org. Right? Okay. Tennis. There were about 20 attendees at the annual Australian Open. Everybody had a great time, and John, of course, had white everywhere. The USTA Winter League has been playing here on Saturdays and Sundays. It continues to be a very big draw. Dates for the Summer League are now in the columns. PPTA's St. Patrick's Day Social and Association meeting is scheduled for March the 9th. Plans are underway for a painting facelift at the tennis shop. I understand we have a new painter, and he's supposed to be looking into, they're picking colors and supposed to be looking into doing that. The new LED lighting has been ordered for the tennis shop, so it will have the same thing we put in at the PAC. Dog park. Discussions are underway with Daniel Van Patten on how best to address the continued mud issue. Ground cover and schedule for pre-emergent weed control at the park. Those little dogs just like to dig, don't they? Okay. Campground. As we've already talked about, there are plans are being developed for general maintenance at the campground, i.e. regrading the roads, extending the sites, and adding new sites. These renovations will take place over the next several months. Just a note on that, the campground is an untapped resource, and once we get it up to speed, it could be as popular as other campgrounds around the country. A very good revenue-producing place if we so choose to update it. Okay, men's softball. Alan Ingerer and Josh Rosenfeld have retired as commissioner and assistant commissioner, and a new one will be announced shortly. The spring season will be starting at the end of this month. Pickleball. The Pickleball Association has elected their new board members. Miles Broughton remains as president. Ken Glass will be the first VP, Scott Wright second, Deborah Glass secretary, and Judy Turner treasurer. The association is looking forward to growing pickleball here in Pecan. PAC. The voting primaries will be held on March the 6th at the PAC. Easter is quickly approaching. Joey Cahey is looking for volunteers to help with egg stuffing on March 27th, scattering eggs early on March 31st, and with the hunt itself on March 31st. If you're available to help with any of these, please contact her at the PAC. I think that's everything unless you have any questions.
Dr. Kanan?
Yeah. Looking forward to the change in my status as a board member. I'm instructed by my partner that I better find something else to do. So I just want to know what the process would be through Sports and Rec to reactivate the Fitness Center Project Subcommittee. How do we do that?
Okay. Well, as you know, after we failed to get enough votes to do it this last year, we were asked by a board member to put it on hold. We did not disband. We put it on hold. So if you're interested in rejuvenating it, then all you need to do is bring it up at the next Sport and Rec meeting, contact the previous members to see if they wanted to continue, ask if any new members would like to join, and there's nothing to say that we can't bring it up again.
Any other comments, questions?
Do that.
Okay.
Mr.
Yes.
Blaylock.
The new kayak ramp, wherever it's decided to put in, would be a great draw point for the campground. Have the kayak races, different age brackets. That would be another big draw for the campground area for a wide variety of age groups. So just want to make sure the members know that.
So there is that big wide concrete culvert. Couldn't that be extended down into the river? I don't know if that's a water course or not.
Well, that's way downstream of... usually kayaks like to float down with the water flow.
So they drive up and then come back down to the campground.
They drive up to the front gate and float down to the campground. That would be especially attractive to my age group, 70, and so.
But so is that appropriate then to pull the kayaks out at that location? Can we get them out of the water there?
Yes,
Yes.
that existing concrete spillway or flowway is very conducive to taking out the kayaks.
Just a comment, I've put a kayak in down there and taken it out. It's a long way to carry your kayak to get it down to the river, so I think, if we use that drainage, that would be great, but it's probably 100 yards, and if you carry the kayak, that's a long way up and down the hill. So something that would give us easier access to the river, I think, would be wonderful.
Well, there's been an interest in kayaking here ever since, long before we moved here in '08. So it's something that keeps being put on the back burner. And if there is a true interest, and if there are enough people, this is what I tell everybody regarding sports and rec. If there are enough people that are interested, we need to get together, we need to form a subcommittee, and we need to look into it. So if you are interested in kayaking, contact the PAC and let them know, and we will get an article in the columns, and we'll take it from there.
Well, I noticed that in Winnett and Rod's book, they mentioned that they had, in the early years, they had kayak races on the river, so it's certainly, that's been going on for a while.
One of our grant members, Dave Narducci, has been working with a fly fishing club on the kayak issue. So there are several people involved in it.
And do mention that they are working on a clean up the Brazos idea. On when?
26th May.
26th of May. And like I've told everybody that mentions it to me, I think it's a wonderful idea. I've got a couple of kayaks I wouldn't mind to loan out and a canoe. So if that does come to fruition, I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Brenda. Any other comments, questions?
I was just going to say on promoting the Brazos River cleanup, prizes for different age groups, the amount of garbage they pick up would be probably an incentive, especially for younger people, if you get the appropriate award.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Let's go on to Tammy Dressman and the Horse Owners Committee.
Okay, we had our last committee meeting in January, and Keith and Daniel were both able to be at that one. We hold our meetings in the evening because we have committee members that work during the day, so they're not able to attend very often, so it was nice to have them, and it was a quite spirited meeting. Anyway, so that was well attended. We are working on some revisions. I'm working with Daniel on some revisions to the boarding contract, and it's mainly just in-house management stuff. It's not, we're not changing fees or anything like that. It's just in-house stuff that has come up, been a couple of issues. So we're working on that, and we are also the holding pens that are at the top of the arena. We're also working on a simple overnight boarding contract for that. We have, there have been some more requests lately with people, I don't know if y'all know, but people that have living quarters, they go also, they camp at the campground sometimes, and so they're looking, if they're coming through with horses, they're looking for a place to put their horses, which works out well because they can camp at the campgrounds. Too. So up until now, that's been free. We haven't charged for that, but there have been a couple of issues with cleanup and things like that that have come up, so we're looking at maybe just charging a fee for overnight horse boarding, and then instituting some rules on cleanup and stuff, so that pastoral or our caretakers at the stables aren't having to do all that. Anyway, so we're looking at just taking care of some things with that, and we'll have that done and have a special meeting to approve all that stuff. We are full, and we have about probably 4 to 5 people on the wait list for space at the stables. Let's see, anything else? Oh, and there's just going to be a few repairs that we'll have to get done with some piping that froze, that burst in the freeze, but we're kind of just waiting on freezing temps to get past before we do all those repairs. I can't think of anything else.
Anything else for the Horse Owners Committee? If not, let's go to Jerry and Marina Committee.
Thank you. First thing is we discussed the new dock and pump relocation project. It is near completion and going along very, very well. The piping for the lines for the gas pump are in, not totally completed, but they are in. A lot of concern was expressed about, well, they're not, since this is a floating dock, will their wind be an issue? The pilings were driven to refusal. They're down, some of them, to 42 feet, so wind will not be an issue. The gas pump will be able to accept credit cards, which, while it's there on the dock, and you can also get a chip for cash if you want to do that. Project should be completed the first half of March, maybe even sooner, hopefully, if the weather works well. On a long-range plan, we discussed a long-range plan for the marina in terms of looking at the footprint and what's the best way to go about moving this stuff, or arranging the dock, the buildings and stuff, because the buildings need a lot of maintenance, and that's an issue we've got to go through. We're going to take and evaluate the maintenance needs for the buildings and how best to approach that. So we'll be looking at a long-range plan on all of that stuff. Boat slip rental and the agreement, we looked at that. The agreement is ready to go forward to legal for review and that type of thing. But it was agreed that we need to do some maintenance on the docks themselves, bring them up to snuff before we do anything as far as changing the rental rates themselves. And that's where we are on that particular project. So we'll be going forward with that. That's all.
Comments, questions for the Marina Committee? Let's move on to communications. Brian Rogers.
Thank you. The Communications Committee met January the 24th. We did not have a quorum at that meeting, but no votes were requested or taken. This past month, we have had one member resign and have recruited another member to fill that position for the remainder of the committee year, pending the board approval of that member. Columns was delivered on time in February. March right now looks on time, but it's February being a short month, it's a little questionable there. But would encourage the contributors to continue getting their articles in on time. Our Facebook page, we do continue to gain followers, and there are people outside Pecan still liking and following the page, so the word is spreading. We've met with, I've met with a couple of clubs and groups on getting their interest or non-interest in social media and tying it into the PPOA website. So we'll be talking about in the committee meeting immediately follow this meeting, scheduling a date. We have a couple of staff members that have quite a bit of experience with social media, so we'll be tapping into that resource to get the word out. And that concludes the report.
Comments, questions for communications? If not, Lou Turner, House and Food and Beverage.
Thank you. Our committee met on February the 13th, and we did have a quorum. We took the initiative to ask the board to give us a green light on moving forward for our wet-dry initiative. If you recall, last year we had such a short window to execute the plan by taking this early time frame. We will, after going through all of the steps to make the process work, we will have a full 60 days to gather the signatures as opposed to about 10 or 12 that we had last year. So we're looking forward to doing that, and a request has already been submitted to the board. We also reviewed the preliminary marina grill concept, and as most of you are aware, the concepts are just that, and we will take no further action until such time as there's an indication that we will be able to go to the marketplace for construction contracts and so forth. We have submitted the documentation to do some wordsmithing on the dress code. That has in the process, and we'll go to bylaws soon, Barry? Yeah, very soon. In the last, I would say, since the last two town hall meetings, maybe is the best term, some questions continue to come up in terms of having firm construction numbers on the projects that were developed. And I think there's a misunderstanding of how the process works. In every case, we have gone out to architects to develop a concept, and that was for the pro shop, the 19th hole, as well as the marina. And in the terms of the expansions or the enclosure and expansion of the other club facilities, in which contracts in those cases were made with local builders. Until such time, an architect who's worth their salt has sufficient knowledge of construction cost, and that's when you ask an architect to give you some cost to execute the concept that you want, that those numbers are developed. And in most cases, they are pretty good numbers because they do have a working knowledge of what it costs to construct in any given area. And those numbers are driven by the cost of doing business in the marketplace. If construction is slow, you have a much more desirable chance of getting a favorable bid to your project than if everyone is so busy that they don't really care whether they get your business or not. And so until such time as the detailed drawings go out for bid, in which everyone then is made aware of exactly the requirements for each of the disciplines that are required to complete a project, you get hard numbers that you know exactly how much the project's going to cost. And I think in all of our cases, and I know Daniel has to go through this in some of the contracts that he has worked on in the last year or two, until such time as you have a commitment to build, basically, you're still dealing in a very soft area because no contractor is going to give you a project of which there has not been some indication that there's going to be a project. And I think that's an issue that everybody contends with. If I were a builder and you ask me questions on a construction project and I want to know when you're going to do it and you don't have an idea, I'm probably not going to respond to you. And so that happens to everyone who's involved in a construction project. So I think there's definitely a misunderstanding or lack of understanding of how the process works in the real world.
Directed toward that issue, we haven't done a good job of explaining that in the light of all the chatter that goes on in next door, and because we also have candidates speaking about that with, to me, an obvious lack of information and the kind of information that you conveyed, and and because they then can make statements that are not based on that reality, it affects, I guess, what the vote's going to be. And so I don't know the answer to that, Lou, but I know I've been a part of that process, sitting in on those meetings. So we have to figure out how to communicate that better. I don't know the answer.
Well, in many cases, we have written articles for columns that kind of tries to explain this process. It's amazing how people read it and still don't understand it, or elect not to understand it. So I agree, and I think for those that do appear for various committees to come see or come here, we talk about in this body, we've talked about these things. And of course, in this case, it'll be on film. And I'm not sure how we get a complete understanding. I'm in total agreement. And we can probably write things and tell things until we're blue in the face to get the same results.
And a couple of the members actually said to me that we did it backwards. We went out and said, what can you do for $1.7 million? And that's just not the way we do it. We actually sat down and came up with a concept, and then the architect gave us a price. We renegotiated, changed the concept until it was something that would meet the membership's needs. And so we don't start at a value, but we start with a concept and work up, and eventually wind up with a value that we think we can support, that the membership can pay for. And then once we do get the green light, if we do get the green light to turn it on, and we'll get the detailed plan, blueprints, we'll go out and we'll get as many bids, at least 3. Our policy requires us to get three bids. And, we try to get the lowest and that will accomplish the job.
I think that there's, Doug, you're absolutely correct. The issue in terms of how we developed most of these, well, all of them, is to look at where we are today in terms of needs to support our membership and where we need to be in 3, 5, or 10 years to support our membership. And what we do today, if it's totally inadequate in terms of 3 to 5 years from now, we will have then literally have to go back and redo it and probably double or triple the cost because we did such poor planning in the beginning. And I think in the case of certainly the projects that we have been working on in our committee is to look at fixing what we have and meeting the needs of our membership down the road. One of the things that I think is a total misunderstanding is that all of the projects that we submitted, and that includes the marina, and I know that these are in fact fixing maintenance issues because we eliminate them by these projects. Everyone will go back and say, we have not maintained very well over the years, and in some cases, can probably make a case for that. What we're attempting to do now is fix that in terms of maintenance and enhancing and improving the facilities that we have.
I'd like to just make one comment, and I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I hear over and over that the cost of this is, way too expensive. If you were to build a home in Pecan right now, you're looking at somewhere between $115 to $125 a square foot. We're looking at 6,400 square feet in the existing pro shop in 19th hole. If you apply that $125, you're at $800,000 if you were to build a brand new building, not take out anything, not build it to commercial construction, not take care of a water suppression system, not do asbestos abatement. So when we hear people say, well, I can build a new house for less than that, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. Again, I'm not speaking to the choir. I am speaking to the choir, but these are the facts moving forward. And for every year we wait to do these amenities, we're adding a 3% minimum cost per every project for every year that we put off doing that. So, if we wait a year, it's going to cost us another couple $100,000, another $300,000 to wait, or another year to get these projects done. I think it's $90,000 we'd be looking at if we wait a year just to do these projects.
Well, Ross, I took one of the new Park Place homes, and I added a commercial kitchen. I did the ADA requirement. I upgraded the HVAC system to support a commercial venture. And if you do that, the $349,000 home goes to about $600,000. And so there is a tremendous difference between what you can do depending on your standard as opposed to what you have to do in the development basically of a commercial property. The other thing is renovations are as expensive in some cases, more so, as new construction. Not always, and I think in our case, the renovation in place of the pro shop in 19th Hole could not anywhere come close to a similar property if it were built away from the building and it'd be new. That's it.
Well, and there's another issue that hopefully we won't have to, but we may have to confront. If ballot issue number 1 does not pass, I know how much work the committee has done throughout this year. And I could refer back to the fitness center project where we actually worked on it for 3 or 4 years. And we were not successful in that vote. I can tell you that getting the committee members to generate enough enthusiasm and energy to get started again on doing this project, not just the fact that it's going to cost us more because costs go up each year, but getting the human resources to get started again after that kind of disappointment, you'll find that's pretty tough. So it gets to be a complicated process. So I hope we're successful, but if we're not, then by golly, it's going to have to be done sometime, and we'll have to figure out how to do it. Lee, you want to just briefly touch on this, and the board, I'm sure, is supportive of it, but just get it on the record.
Yes, we need to come to the board to ask basically for permission to solicit, and that is to solicit signatures that we would go out and get some 1,600 plus names on our petition to make Precinct 2 wet instead of dry in terms of its sale and of alcohol beverages and the type of license that you then could apply for through the Texas Alcohol Beverage Control Board. It gives us as a club this facility, and in the case of the future of the marina, the opportunity then to not have a significant reduction in accounting for the use and sale of alcohol to non-members, guests, and all of those type of things. And it's principally a cost savings in how we do our accounting. It's also the potential cost saving on the procurement of alcohol, beer, and wine particularly. And what that total impact is financially in the long term, kind of an unknown until we negotiate some purchasing agreements with the vendors. But until we have that option of wet dry, we continue to operate as a private club and go through the accounting nightmares and that Janice has to go through now to keep us in line with the requirements of TABC.
Mr. President, I think we need to add this to the agenda for our next meeting to bring it to a vote. And, we're going to pass this thing, but it's a matter of getting it on the record.
No, we'll do that. And I appreciate, Lee, you bringing us to this to us in a timely fashion. We will put it on this month's agenda, and I'm sure that the board would act favorably on it and get you started.
Our process for making sure that we meet all of the gates and not be backed into a corner will start somewhere around the 1st of April, so that we get the 60-day window for us to gather signatures that will include a couple of major activities in the community, specifically the street dance and the 4th of July functions, where we have a large group of members, that we can attack with vigor.
I'm told that after the 2020 census, that Precinct 2 in Hood County will just beat Pecan Plantation. And we won't have to go outside the gates. But just because of our population growth with respect to the rest of Hood County. So, but right now, Precinct 2 includes some parts of Mambrino Highway, and I don't know how much on the east side. But
literally all the way out to 144 and down to Grumpy's. Yeah, so it's a big precinct.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, and I think probably, I know that Carter is helping us in terms of working with some of the subdivisions and other activities outside of Pecan to help us get signatures so that we can, because it stands to benefit some other folks other than just us. Grumpy's for one.
Anything else for food and beverage? Tammy, go ahead.
Not for food and beverage. Sorry, it wasn't for food and beverage. I just wanted to make one comment about the drainage thing. And if Architectural Control Committee could even figure out where to direct a homeowner, because we happen to be one of those that was sued for drainage issues, and it ends up being, you can't change the flow, the natural flow of the land. It ends up being a sediment issue more than the water issue, which we did not know about and have done everything that we know to do. So we contacted the city, we contacted everybody we knew. Nobody knew who to tell us to go to. We didn't have any guidelines. We had no idea that the developers wouldn't have been, it's like, as a homeowner, you don't have the foresight to know all of the issues that are going to come up with that. And there's nowhere, we still can't figure out who you end up going to for anything. It was somebody not even involved with it that told us, that used to work for the city, that told us it was more of a sediment issue than it was the water. So I don't know, like, I'm just thinking as a homeowner, if you're building an Architectural Control Committee is who you have to send your plans to and get approved, if they can even, just as a project, find out who you go to to get those studies done, I have no idea.
We're not in the city, we're in Hood County. What city are you referring to?
Granbury.
Well, why would you go to Granbury?
That's where we were told. Who else? Who do you go to?
Actually, that information comes from the state. You need to go to the state. The state will tell you what to do. This is a problem that's going to be, and I started talking about this several years ago when I was president. Every time we put in a new street upstream from the street that you live on, that's going to affect you. And until we get this situated in such a way, as a lot of the country is already, if you do anything upstream to my property to cause me problems, that's your problem, not mine. And right now, we're spending thousands of dollars correcting problems that should not even be ours.
I agree. We ended up doing the same thing. We weren't developers. We had no idea. But yeah, there is a state law that says you can't change the natural flow. Well, just about anything you do to try to slow down the rushing water to keep the sediment from washing, they consider as changing the natural flow.
Well, there's sheet erosion or sheet water and stream water. And when it's out flat in the orchard, it's got a different termination that it does when it gets in a channel. And it's a totally different ball game, and we're going to have to deal with that sooner or later, because every time somebody puts in a street above you, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm not sure I understand this. Doug and I have been having a little side conversation, but the homeowner is responsible for doing the engineering study that accounts for the drainage. And so, Doug, if you would expand on that, I appreciate it.
It really starts with the developer. When he develops a subdivision and goes out and files his plats with the county, he's required to do an analysis of the water flow and drainage. In the past, I'm not sure how detailed, how good that was that the Anthonys did. And we have issues that we've been fighting, like Woodlawn, like the Monticello Circle. All those are because insufficient planning was done by the developer. And we have people on Wedgeville who have sued us over the issue of, is it our responsibility? And the court has ruled that it's not PPOA's responsibility, it's the developer or the homeowner. Okay, the issue really then becomes when you buy a lot from the developer, okay, your responsibility is when you build your house and when you build your driveway, when you landscape your yard, if that house and that driveway then redirects the flow of water onto your neighbor's yard, you're responsible. And so that's the piece of paper we send out with all the plans that are approved, and it says, you should consider hiring a water engineer to do a study. Now, most homeowners aren't going to do that.
But your operative word there is consider. Right. You are not required.
Right. And we're not, and we don't require you to do it, but...
Well, and when we built 16 years ago, we didn't know that, and that was never mentioned anywhere. So, just as not having any idea. My only suggestion is if they can even tell people to do it or where you go to do it, it would certainly help, because as a homeowner, you are responsible.
And I agree, and I think that's what Jim said, that he would take that and see if we can come up with a list, or at least resources that people can reach out to.
Any other questions? Just real quick on assessment memberships, we're up to 3,055, which is +5 after our first quarter. And if I don't hear any other questions, Gordon.
I'm wearing another hat when I make this announcement. There will be a service here on Saturday afternoon for Wally Herzog. I'm making that announcement on behalf of Connie, the widow, so that those of you who knew him, worked with him, would be welcome. She welcomes you to attend between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. And Mr. President, I believe that concludes our committee reports for this month.
Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.